Hello, everyone. This is Hillary Sloan, and this is Driftwood Conversations. Sometimes life doesn't go the way we planned, and sometimes that's where the real story begins. In this episode, I sit with Katherine Hervey, a woman whose life has been shaped by contrast and courage. She lost her way for a while, like many of us do, and then through deep soul work and inner listening, she found her footing. She became a public defender, a filmmaker, and an artist committed to justice and truth. But more than anything, Katherine is a seeker. Her story isn't about climbing ladders. It's about circling inward until the art and the truth converge. We talk about her childhood in El Paso, her path through addiction and recovery, her work in the prison system, the documentary she created from those experiences, The Prison Within. We also discuss her podcast, Broken is Beautiful, co-hosted with incarcerated writer and activist Chris Blackwell, and what it means to hold space for hope in the darkest places. This is a conversation about justice, yes, but also about healing, creativity, and becoming who we were meant to be. So let's begin. Here is my conversation with Katherine Hervey. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, perfect.
And I'm going to have you introduce yourself. Give me your name, who you are, and what you do, and then we'll go in deeper.
So my name is Katherine Hervey. I'm so happy to be here. I'm an artist, a filmmaker, and an activist, a criminal justice, criminal legal reform activist. It's a space that I've been in for many times, and I sometimes make art about that, and other times I make art about other things.
Okay, that just gave me about 13 questions.
Bring it.
Okay, were you a district attorney?
Oh, gosh. No. I was a public defender. I would never do that.
Okay, but public defender. Well, that's a big deal. So you were a lawyer, too.
I was a lawyer. Yeah, I was a lawyer for the Los Angeles Public Defender's Office. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not small. That's big.
It is. I'm still a lawyer. And, sometimes I picked up some cases recently, but right now, not really doing it so much.
And when you mention art, tell me more about that. What kind of art?
Well, film, like really mostly film. I'm a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker. I just started a podcast as well, which I consider to be part of my creative process. I'm moving into acting as well, which I'm really excited about. And then I'm also starting to create this piece that incorporates film and performance art.
Okay, we've got to talk about all of them.
Let's do it.
And I also, though, want to know a little bit of your history, where you were born, where you were raised, what in your early years brought you here.
So I grew up in El Paso, Texas, which is a border town. I think it deeply shaped me. I knew very, very, very early on that the world was not right. You learn that when you grow up in a border town. For example, oftentimes when I would be on the bus going to school, there's like this big stretch of highway where on one side is El Paso, is Texas, it's the United States, and then there's the Rio Grande River, and then it's Juarez, Mexico on the other side. And, those two sides looked very different, really. It was just kind of like miles and miles of shantytown, and it wasn't lit, so at night it was just totally dark, even though there was thousands of people living there. Oftentimes on the bus, you would see sometimes like a woman or a family crossing the border, kind of like holding a baby, crossing the river, holding a baby over their head or their belongings over their head. Border Patrol kicking up dirt, coming to get them as they were crossing over. I was really confused by that very early on when I was very young, because what I also saw was that I was living in a city, growing up in a city. I mean, this is language that I have for it now, of course. I mean, I was so young, but I could see the racial disparities very early on, even though in El Paso, probably, white people made up like 10 or 15% of the population, and the rest was really a Latino population. And yet you could really see the disparities. I think less so now, but, more so at that time. Who was in charge? Who had power? Who had money? And when I was so young, I didn't understand why even they were coming over, because I could see kind of like a mistreatment and a separation early on then that I didn't quite understand. Yeah, and it really fueled me, I think, when I left El Paso, coming out into my 20s, I was very saddened by the world.
Is that what encouraged you to go into law?
I think I went to law school in my 30s.
Oh.
So, oh gosh, no. I mean, from a home where I dissociated very early on. I was not really part of the world for my 20s, I would say. I mean, I was doing things. I was an artist, but I was very lost. There was a lot of bad decisions, drug addiction, I was doing things, but I wasn't as fully formed as some of my peers. I didn't have the support, the care that I needed to kind of step into the world as a young person. So I really had to find my way.
Did you have any spiritual base as a child?
Yeah, very much so, actually. And I think it was really the one thing that kept me alive is I can see now that even though I grew up in a household where I wasn't safe, that I was always able to connect to this very solid, soulful part of myself.
Are you an empath?
Oh my gosh, so much. Okay. Yeah. And that's something that you have to learn to navigate throughout your life too, right? Because then you're constantly giving yourselves to causes, to people, and instead of to yourself, instead of really feeding yourself first.
The way you described your 20s, I totally related to that.
Taking on people's energy, investing in people.
Their problems, yes.
Without boundaries, because you see the good in them, even though they're destroying themselves, and taking you along with them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, welcome.
Good times.
Fellow traveler.
Yeah.
And what was going on in your home life, if I may ask? You said it was unsafe. Was it physically unsafe or emotionally?
I think both, but, at a certain point more so emotionally. It was a very tyrannical household. I really, it's such a sensitive thing to talk about. And I'm very sensitive talking about it publicly because I don't want to, throw people under the bus either.
We don't have to go that deep into it.
I was told that I was small, that I was nothing, that I wouldn't succeed, and yet there was a part of me that didn't believe it, and then you come out in your 20s and you're like, I'm going to show them, but you really have no idea who you are. You're just kind of living to be the opposite of what you grew up in instead of really finding who you are. It's been a journey.
I'm assuming you feel like you found yourself. Although it's a constant, isn't it?
I mean, I think it's a constant. And I think that that's the creative process, honestly, is that journey for me has been very enveloped in my creativity and my creative process.
Artists tend to be very sensitive and also very connected. Mm-hmm. And it can be difficult and it can be a saving grace.
Mm-hmm. I think it's both. And I think it has to be both. I really see now that, there's two sides to every coin, that there's always the light and the dark imbued in absolutely everything, in our bodies, in our thoughts, in our souls, in the world. I really embrace that now.
I was introduced to you through Gordon Clark. Mm-hmm. I did a podcast of it, and he talks about that a lot. Mm-hmm. And Gordon, that's really part of his artistic story.
Yes.
The light and the dark.
It's not a surprise to me. Gordon and I are working together on 2 projects. So there's a lot of meshing there in terms of creative inspiration.
So how long were you in the legal field? You were defense attorney. And am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, what city?
Los Angeles. I was a public defender in Los Angeles, and I went to law school in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles. And all through law school, I worked at the Los Angeles Public Defender's Office too. And then I became a lawyer for them. But then really, I was not with them for very long. Probably about 6 months into passing the bar, becoming a real lawyer, I got sober. I was I want to say really, I don't mean this in a good way. I actually think it's kind of scarier, but I was a very high functioning alcoholic and drug addict. I actually started taking these Kundalini classes, these Kundalini yoga and meditation classes. And it was almost like I was propelled to go to this practice totally outside of myself. Like I was literally waking up at 3:30 to go to these 4 a.m. sadhanas for 2.5 hours to chant these prayers and these mantras, and then come home, change, and then take the subway into work and be there like at 8:30. And I mean, like it was not even of my own volition. I was just going, and I would go and I would listen to the mantras, and I would just sob and I would cry. Like there was just so much grief and pain and just really processing a lot in these, these dark rooms with these other people chanting. And in that process, I realized I had to get sober, that, I was lying to myself, basically, because that's what you do when you're an addict. You're in denial. You're not taking accountability for yourself, for your actions, for other people. And once I got sober, my body told me on a really deep cellular level, like literally, Katherine, you are not a lawyer, you are an artist. And if you don't go back to being an artist, you will die a spiritual death. Like my body was literally telling me, like, we are not going to participate in this anymore. And, I was also kind of looking around at other people in the public defender's office. And I have so much respect for people that do this work. So much respect for people that do this work. Like, it's really, like, the role of a public defender is really diminished in society, in films, in TV shows. They're seen as like these like really incompetent people who maybe are lawyers, maybe aren't lawyers. But I started seeing that, okay, like I am not like these people, or I'm different from, and started kind of seeing how they were kind of like walking the hallways of the courtroom and the office. I don't know, ashy sallowness. And again, I think this is just my body and my perception being like, get out, get the fuck out of here. And so I did. I had, then at that point, no income, no money. I left Los Angeles and I moved to an artist commune in Arizona to kind of start over. But what was the question that you asked me?
I don't know, but I was right with you. We were traveling, and I relate to a lot of what you're saying. I mean, I had my own epiphanies between going to psychology, studying psychology, and it was like, oh no, art.
Yes.
So we're in the same place. Yes. We're traveling here.
And yet, it was also a huge part of my journey and creative process, right? Because it allowed me to, make this film that I made that has been very successful in the world and that still travels around the world.
Tell us the name of the film.
Sure. The name is called The Prison Within. It's a film really about restorative justice and the gross and total inadequacies of our criminal justice system. And it takes place primarily inside San Quentin prison. It follows these simultaneous trajectories of this group of men in San Quentin who come together and sit in circle to heal. And all the men in the circle, they've killed someone. They've committed murder. And I love them. I love these men. And they come together and they heal. Like, they connect the dots of their trauma that led them to essentially take someone's life. Not only that, but then to take like really deep accountability for their actions and for their lives, right? So that are not victims of their trauma, but like in this deep, heartfelt, body, cellular way, taking accountability for themselves and now who do I want to become? And I mean, I'll tell you, like, knowing these men and filming these men and sitting in circle with these men, like, they were such teachers to me. They've been some of the biggest teachers to me of accountability, of like really looking at yourself at every moment of your life, like really looking at your thoughts at every day, at every moment. And, you know, how am I talking to myself? How am I talking to other people? How am I presenting myself to the world in a way that is going to, you know, create love, create joy, create healing? And I learned it from men in San Quentin who, you know, were there because they took a life. And I'm so grateful for that experience, because I think, you know, and it's so interesting because like what we were talking about earlier in terms of creative process, that process is what then allowed me to really start going into, you know, my own trauma and my own past and my own childhood in ways that I wasn't able to before. But the film follows these men alongside survivors of violent crime as well, to kind of show these parallel trajectories that we're all survivors before we're perpetrators, essentially. Like, everyone, like, you don't have to be in prison to be a survivor, to be a perpetrator. Like, we've all hurt people. We're constantly perpetrating things against ourselves and other people in our daily lives. You know, I have this really strong belief that we're all capable as human beings to do the most beautiful, courageous benevolence. Like, you know, we're so capable of benevolence, and we're also so capable of hatred and harm, given the right set of circumstances. We all have it in us. I think that if we think that we don't have it in us, that's like a huge crux of what is wrong in our society right now, right? Is that it's like this constant othering. Oh, well, that person is capable of that, but I am not. When really, we're all capable of the same things, given the right set of circumstances. So, I mean, for me, it was this really deep film that kind of brought forward, you know, the work that I'd done in prisons, the work that I'd done as a public defender, the friendships that I've formed, like deep friendships that I've formed with people in prison. And then at the end of the film, it brings in one of the survivors of the film, and she sits in circle with these men, and they heal together. We really need that to heal. We really need to come together from disparate places, from disparate hearts, from different connections to heal.
I've always had that feeling we needed to change the justice system. And having been a victim at certain times of certain things, which is another story, but, you know, I could say that with integrity. We need to come together. We're all victims and we're all perpetrators.
Yes. Yeah.
And if we don't heal it and don't admit to it, then it just continues.
Exactly. And, you know, and forgiveness is a big part of that too, right? Like forgiving ourselves, forgiving other people who have harmed us, and that forgiveness doesn't mean it's okay what you did, but, you know, how can we find a way to move forward with this?
Forgiveness is a really huge piece of our spiritual evolvement, I think, evolution. You know, and I've thought about that a lot, not in a while, so it's not easy to access what I had thought, but I know there was a whole process in forgiving people, and it wasn't what I thought it would be. It's like you said, it's not just you're okay. No, that wasn't okay.
Nothing is ever what we think it's going to be. It's always so much more complex and so much, so much more nuance. And, like the same with creating art. Like, I feel like as artists, it's almost kind of delusional. Like when I started creating The Prison Within, I was like, oh, I'm going to create this film and it's going to be easy. And, I didn't think it was going to be easy, but I had no idea, really. Like making that film was my film school. I lost my train of thought here.
Well, you were talking about the complexity of things and layers.
Well, and the delusion of being an artist is that, I think in order to start creating something, there's this part of us inside of us that convinces ourselves of kind of like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's done. And it's never that. I don't know, for me, it's never that. It's like, 1.5 to 4.2 to 10.7, and then, looking at it from the top and the bottom and restructuring things. And it's always just such a process for me, really, to create something and to break something down. And I think actually that's also because I really embrace the complexity and the nuance of life and the creative process, maybe in a way that other people don't. I don't know. That's my process, at least.
Well, I think it's a matter of living art. Mm-hmm. I mean, literally, the art itself becomes a life force once you've created it. It has a consciousness. You've put everything into it. It has an energy. But you're also living the process of creating.
Yes. And I think also the creative idea also has a life of its own, that it landed in front of you to take on, but it also has its own trajectory. I remember reading that book on creativity by Elizabeth Gilbert. She's a writer. Mm-hmm. She was talking about how she had an idea for a book that she had kind of started and then kind of left. And then years later, met another writer, maybe like 10 years later, who had a similar idea but kind of created it in a different way, right? And it's this idea that when the creative idea comes to you, it's a gift, right? It's like this gift from the universe almost of, here, do you want to play with this subject matter? Like, I'm calling on you as being trusted to take on this subject, right? And then if you don't kind of grab it and really start playing it with it there, that it kind of moves on. And I've had that with some projects, like with some writing projects that I waited too long to complete, and, they lose their juice. I think they go to someone else.
Well, yes, and sometimes they're just there to visit you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, as part of your growth.
Yes. I had a piece, I went to see an Issey Miyake show at Otis, the Japanese designer, clothing designer.
Yes.
And it was magnificent. It was layered in music and lights and clothing, and some of the clothing were bird cages on the mannequins, and it just expanded my thinking of art so much. I went home and I wrote this performance piece called The Art of Being, Being Art.
Nice.
And it was the idea of living art and art being alive.
Yes.
What we're talking about. And I kept working with it. It went into a performance piece. It went into a science fiction book. It got bigger and smaller, and I could never complete it. It just never did. But what I'm realizing, even talking to you right this moment, is I'm still living it.
Yes, I love that. Yes, beautiful.
So everything I do, everyone I talk to, the idea of merging spirituality and art and creativity and life, that everything has its own value. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Every moment.
I love that. Yeah, I think that, there's kind of these big constructs on what is an artist and what it is to create, and they tend to get a little boxy, really. And, I think, and then sometimes I put myself in those boxes. And I really notice how uncomfortable I am in them. Because really that box isn't allowing room for, I think what we're talking about is really like a spiritual process. For me, everything comes back to that in some way. And I don't mean that in like in a light, like in a, oh, we're spiritual beings of light. For me, like the spiritual process is really like the darkness, like the dark parts of really getting to know oneself and getting to know the world and your parts in it, and moving through the darkness in order to like find some sort of hope, some sort of light, some sort of creative spark. For me, it's very embedded in that.
It's a discovery process.
Yeah.
There's so much more to my conversation with Katherine, but I'm going to end part 1 here, and we'll pick it up tomorrow with part 2. I created Driftwood Conversations to connect with people who had interesting stories and to discover how they navigated the world they live in. Thank you, Katherine, for your time, for your conversation, for your honesty. And to my audience, thank you for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Katherine's work, The Prison Within is streaming on Apple TV, Amazon, and YouTube. Broken is Beautiful is available at brokenisbeautifulpod.com. And Chris Blackwell's nonprofit, Look to Justice, is doing vital work at look2justice.org. This is Hillary Sloan, and this is Driftwood Conversation.